organizing such a wonderful conference and hospitality. Now let us start with the discussion of adnexal masses. The esteemed panel is with us on the dais, and the expert Dr. Bharti is also here, Dr. Bharti Abhyankar. Let us start with the adnexal masses. We all know that adnexa is something adjacent to the uterus, or the adnexal mass which lies between the uterus and the lateral pelvis wall. So it may be a mass of ovary, it may be a mass of a fallopian tube, or any structures which lies between the broad ligament. Okay, so in these panel discussion will be discussing the different case scenario and only the practical aspect of the diagnosis and the management. So let us start with the first case. She is a 24-year young lady complaining of irregular menses since last 8 months. Married 6 months back, nulli gravida. On examination, per abdomen examination and per speculum examination is normal, while on PV examination, normal uterus, and there is a presence of left adnexal cyst which is non-tender, while right fornix is clear. Ultrasonography examination shows normal uterus and a left ovarian unilocular cyst of 4.5 by 4.6 centimeter. There is no solid content in it. So my first question to my panelist is, what is your diagnosis?
Ma'am, it is a very clear-cut case of a ovarian cyst, simple cyst, as there is no cystic lesion or some other fluids is seen in the USG. And otherwise she is also saying that it's a irregular menses since 8 months. That is a clear-cut case of
definitely a simple ovarian cyst, but what do you think? Is it a functional cyst or a pathological cyst?
It's a functional
cyst.
Functional cyst.
So any cyst, a young patient, and this simple cyst, which is a unilocular anechoic cyst, which is a fluid-filled cyst, there are no septa, no solid content, and which is 5 centimeter. It is mainly a simple cyst, which is usually a functional cyst. We know the different causes of functional cysts. Can anybody enumerate?
The ovum degenerates, and the lining of the ovary, it goes on secreting the fluid, and it forms a functional cyst.
Yes.
And that is a very normal thing in reproductive age group. So it should be just left as it is, and we should just do the surveillance.
Yes.
And we should
so the
check
next question is, how will you manage?
Yeah, we will.
Yeah, you can join. Please come.
We will just leave it as it is, and we'll just observe it and do the sonography after 3 months. We can see the regression in the cyst, or there can be continuation of cyst, or it can increase also.
Okay.
Otherwise, we can start contraceptive pills to just avoid the other cyst to generate.
Yes, very rightly told that any functional cyst of the ovary in a young patient, you must follow it at least for up to 3 months. Or to control the hormone imbalance, what she has rightly told, you have to start with a low dose OC pills for 4 weeks to 3 months and reassess the patient after 3 months, mainly by the ultrasonography, whether it's regressing or the increasing. Most of the times it regresses on its own or with a low dose OC pill of 4 weeks to 3 months. My next question to my esteemed panelist is the management same for the postmenopausal patient?
Definitely not.
Yes.
We are just going to monitor the patient up to 6 months to 1 year. The repeated CA 125 investigations with USG, we have to see is the value is increasing. If it is persistently same, we are not going to disturb anything. But if it raising, then definitely we are going to have the surgical interpretation.
Anybody differs from her opinion?
Family history is important. We have to go thoroughly family history, personal history regarding breast cancer or a GI cancer.
See, as she is a postmenopausal lady, any cyst which is more than 3 centimeter is significant. Please remember, it is said that a ovary which is double that of the size of a contralateral ovary is also suspicious in a postmenopausal age group. Therefore, though it is a simple ovarian cyst of 5 centimeters. So any cyst above 3 centimeter in a postmenopausal age group, you must evaluate with the CA-125 levels, one thing, and she needs a laparoscopic evaluation. If the laparoscopic evaluation is suggestive of a malignancy, you have to go for a frozen section. If it is suggestive of just benign nature, you have to go for oophorectomies. Now the next case.
Just a minute. Even though it could be benign, but still you shouldn't do a cystectomy, do a oophorectomy and send it for a histopathology. That is more important, so that you don't miss out anything.
Yes, and it will prevent.
It is said that in postmenopausal women, the ovary should not be palpable. If it is palpable, it is pathological, and you should evaluate it.
So the take-home message from this case is that a simple ovarian cyst which is less than 5 centimeter in a premenopausal. Premenopausal means young age group is to be followed, or you can give a low dose pills up to 3 months. Second important take-home message from this case is in postmenopausal lady, any cyst, even if it is a simple more than 3 centimeter, is to be evaluated. The next case is a 32-year-old lady who is married 7 years. There is a history of infertility. Patient is symptomatic. She is having dysmenorrhea. Per abdomen and per speculum examination are normal. On PV examination, uterus is bulky with restricted mobility. Right fornix is free, but in left and posterior fornix, there is a cystic tender mass of 5 by 5 centimeter. While ultrasonography indicate a left ovary is replaced by a round, thick-walled multilocular cyst of size 6 by 6.2 centimeter with ground glass appearance and regular margin, while CA-125 level is 105 international unit per ml. So my first question is, what is your diagnosis?
My provisional diagnosis is endometriosis.
Endometriotic cyst. Yes. What are the favoring points?
The infertility, dysmenorrhea, the infertility, and on the fornix is fixed, as well as on sonography, the ground glass appearance.
Yes.
That is telling it.
So the first thing is she is a age of manifestation, is a young reproductive age group patient. Second, she has a dysmenorrhea, she has infertility history, and clinical examination is indicative of a tender adnexal mass. And one more important thing is, please remember that any adnexal masses, the ancillary testing, which is very important for detection or diagnosis, is a ultrasonography, a simple technique which everybody is having today, that is a ultrasonography. Here the ultrasonography shows that it is a smooth wall cyst and with the ground glass appearance. Therefore, if you remember the International Ovarian Tumor Analysis classification, the more importance is given on the echogenicity. That is, if the echogenicity is ground glass, dense, with a smooth margin, which is there is no vascular flow, is usually suggestive of a endometriotic cyst. And one important thing, CA-125 is raised. Here it is 105. There are many benign conditions where you see the raised CA-125. Can anybody would add, tell the list of?
Even in pregnancy, even in fibroids, it is increased, and there are some.
Also in PID.
PID. So pregnancy, PID, fibroid, even liver disease, adenomyosis, all these cases you will get the raised CA-125. So the next question is, what would be your approach in this case? Anybody?
Since she is a case of infertility, complaining of dysmenorrhea, fixed mass, first line of management would be surgery. That is, you do a cystectomy, reduce the total endometriotic tissue, so that, and you can at the same time analyze how is the anatomical structure inside the tubo-ovarian anatomy, so that would give you a further insight into her infertility management.
Yes. So as it is a symptomatic cyst with infertility, you must do a laparoscopic evaluation. And what she has rightly told, will do a cystectomy with adhesiolysis if they are present. What other management will you do along with the cystectomy?
After cystectomy, we should give the Leupride for three doses, so that the other endometriotic tissue is also taken care of, and the fertility potential will be better afterwards.
So to prevent the adhesions, again, you must supply with either a luperoid or a Dynogest or a low dose ocipils, depending on your scenario and the patient's affordability and the severity of condition.
That is to create 3 to 6 months pseudo pregnancy condition or the pseudo postmenopausal condition.
Yes, that is also very important, that there should be suppression of the estrogen axis for 3 months.
Also during laparoscopy, we have to see the any peritoneal deposits or on bowels.
A proper
also in pouch of Douglas.
laparoscopic evaluations to see for adhesions, any deposits anywhere in the body, and the pouch of Douglas, uterus, ovaries, everything, and adhesiolysis if possible. If she has infertility, you can combine it with other methylene blue test and all these things also. Coming to the next case, she is a 28-year-old lady, but she is a Paris woman with 2 living children. Both are full-term normal delivery. She has a history of copper T inserted for 2 years. Now she is complaining of lower abdominal pain, foul-smelling discharge, PV off and on. She has dyspareunia. Menstrual history is normal. On examination, she is mildly febrile, tachycardia, pulse is 100 per minute regular. On per abdomen examination, she has tenderness in lower abdomen. Per speculum examination, vaginitis is plus. On PV examination, uterus is normal, but left fornix there is 4 by 4 centimeter cystic mass with tenderness with restricted mobility. On investigation, there is leukocytosis, CA125 is 42, and on ultrasonography, uterus is normal, ovaries are normal, but the left fallopian tube is enlarged, containing low echogenic material. So my question is, what is your diagnosis?
It is definitely a case of pelvic inflammatory disease.
Is it an acute or a chronic? What do you think?
Yes.
Acute one.
So I would say it's an acute exacerbation of a chronic disease, because she has already a tubal mass, and now she is presented with a fever, tachycardia, tenderness, tender mass in the adnexa. So it's an acute exacerbation of a chronic PID. So very simple, what are the causes of PID? It's usually asked in UG and PG questions, but it's very important for practitioner point of view also.
Chlamydia and gonorrhea are mostly.
That means it's
a
sexually
infection
transmitted disease. It
ascending
is a
infection from vagina.
Disease. And if the lower genital tract infection, if it is left untreated, many a times patients coming to you in the OPD for vaginal discharge, you don't take efforts to put a speculum and see the vagina and the cervix. There may be vaginitis, there may be chronic cervicitis also. So any infection of a lower female genital tract, if left untreated, it may ascend up and may lead to this complication of a pelvic inflammatory disease. So my next question is, how will you diagnose, how will you manage?
With antibiotic, I have antibiotic.
Yes. Anybody else?
If the symptoms are more acute, then we have to admit the patient and start the IV antibiotics, analgesics. And we have to continue the antibiotic course minimum 14 days.
First of all, like a patient who is presenting in this type, we have to rule out many differential diagnoses also. So this needs a multidisciplinary approach. And if the patient is having all these acute symptoms and her clinical investigations are showing there is sepsis, patient may go into peritonitis or something, you have to rule out what are the causes, like, or is it something acute appendicitis? You never know what the USG shows is the same thing. So usually an exploratory laparotomy or laparoscopy in association with the surgeon is required in plus the IV antibiotics.
See, the first management, there are 3 principal mainly PID. One is a supportive treatment. What we always give is antipyretic, analgesics, maintenance of hydration. Second, to eradicate the infection, we'd like to give her antibiotic. But antibiotic, how will you start? We'll take a cervical swab and send it for a culture. and depending on that we'll start the antibiotic. But we don't have that much time because patient is acutely febrile. So we take a swab, send for culture, but start the antibiotic is a blanket therapy. And the regime which is advocated here by CDC is a cefoxitin 2 gram IV plus doxy for 24 hours, then doxycycline BD as he has rightly said for 14 days. Second regime is a clindamycin which is a cover of anaerobic and gram negative plus gentamicin for 24 hours followed by a tablet doxycycline for 14 days. So the second management principle is to eradicate the infection with an adequate antibiotic therapy or a coverage. Many times patients take antibiotic when they are admitted, injectable. When they go home, they feel better and they stop taking. So the complete course is very important in case of a chronic pelvic inflammatory disease. And doxycycline for the maintenance dose is very important because most of the PID patients, the cause is a chlamydial infections. Or another, nowadays we can start with the erythromycin group, that is azithromycin can also be given for the chlamydia infection for a long time.
And for all practical purposes, we add metronidazole.
Anaerobic.
Anaerobic.
Yes. Here we have started with the clindamycin. So, and the third important thing is if there is any problem like a tubo-ovarian mass or a pelvic peritonitis, if it is suspected, then only there is a need of a surgical intervention, what she told. Otherwise, we don't surgically intervene in an acute phase. We just give an antibiotic, antipyretic, maintain the hydration and follow up. But if sonography, the clinical findings are indicative that it is a chronic tubo-ovarian abscess which is persistent, or there is a pelvic peritonitis which is an acute phase, you may have to surgically intervene.
And
Now,
about the copper she is having,
that has to be removed.
that has to be removed after the suppression of infection.
Yes, it's very important because along the thread of a copper T, the infections always ascend. Therefore, copper T has to be removed. There is no doubt or debate on this
And the
point.
repeat sample, culture samples after the completion of the course.
The antibiotic. Now the next case is a 35-year-old lady. She is married since 5 years, nulli gravida. She has a very short history of distension of abdomen since 2 months. This is one of my patient I managed 6 months back, so I specifically included this case. On clinical examination, there is a huge lump extending up to ZP sternum. Ultrasonography of abdomen shows ovarian mass which is mostly cystic, size is 20 by 22 centimeter with multiple septa. MRI is also done in this case, indicative of same findings. CA125 is 44.8. So, looking at all the history as well as the clinical findings and also the imaging finding, we thought that it could be a benign ovarian cyst because CA125 is not increased much. It is a clear cyst on the ultrasonography, clinically also cystic swelling. So we posted her for a laparotomy. There was a cystic mass of 30 by 25 centimeter, a huge mass, but there were few solid areas on cut section, replacing the left ovary, right ovary, tube and uterus was normal, there was no ascites. As there was only few solid areas on cut section, we sent her just for a safety, for a frozen section biopsy, but accidentally we found the report as an adult granulosa cell tumor. So this case is an eye-opener for everybody, that this also happens sometime. You should keep in mind that a frozen section biopsy facility should be available in such type of the cases. So my next question to the panelist is, how will you go ahead now? We have done a laparotomy, we have removed the tumor, it's found to be an adult granulosa cell tumor which we were not expecting, and she's a 35-year nulli gravida patient. So what will you do?
As she is nulli gravida, we have to be more conservative in this case.
Yes.
I would like to do oophorectomy in this case and keep follow-up.
Anybody else?
Yeah, unilateral salpingo-oophorectomy is needed in this case. And another ovary which is normal, the patient should be given chance for fertility, conception,
Yes.
because she has very less time left with her.
She's a nulli gravida and a young lady. She's not conceived yet. So we will definitely go for a fertility preserving surgery. Why we'll go for a fertility preserving surgery here? Because on laparotomy only the ovary is replaced by the mass. There is no other evidence. The abdomen hole is a normal. Okay. So we will do a fertility preserving surgery and we can give her a chance to have a pregnancy in the future. So what fertility preserving surgery we did in this case? We removed the complete tumor with omentectomy, right and left peritoneal biopsy with peritoneal washings and for cytological examination. It was a huge tumor, 2.5 kg was the weight of that tumor. So my next question is, how are you going to keep a post-operative surveillance? Because you have kept the another ovary, you have kept the tube, only removed the ovary. Okay. So how will you, how are you going to keep a post-operative surveillance? That is very important, no? Because recurrence, we know that it's very common.
Yeah, we will go for a TVS examination after 3 months, and we will see. And we should follow her for at least 1 year.
Yes. So post-surgical evaluation is every 3 monthly for 1 year and then yearly for 10 years. Adult granulosa tumor is a lazy tumor which is slowly growing. So you have to follow this case for 10 years. And by 3 things. One is clinical examination to see for the mass, ultrasonography of abdomen, and third important thing is a tumor markers, that is serum inhibin 1 and inhibin 2. Why we missed the diagnosis here? Because we did a CA125, a huge clear cyst, we did a CA125 which was normal. And every imaging findings were also cystic. So we were thinking of the benign cyst. But please remember that adult granulosa cell tumor or any granulosa cell tumor, the tumor marker is not CA125. It is a inhibin. So we did not do inhibin in this case in a preoperative phase. But post-operative, now we are keeping a surveillance with the inhibin levels. Okay, so this is very, very important, that we thought that granulosa cell tumor is a tumor of menopausal age group. But this also happens sometime rarely. Now the next case is, she's a 50-year-old lady, a postmenopausal, and she's complaining of recurrent blood stain discharge per vagina. On clinical examination, the general examination and per abdomen examination is normal. PV examination, uterus is normal. There is a left adnexal mass which is not tender. Ultrasonography of pelvis shows left adnexal mass query hydrosalpinx 8 by 8 centimeter in size. Uterus is normal. Endometrial thickness is 6 millimeter. Ovary and right tubes are normal. As she is a 50-year postmenopausal, there was a blood stain discharge. We did a pap smear and endometrial biopsy. Pap smear, of course, as a evaluation in every woman we do. And that too, she is having a blood stain discharge. We did a pap smear. It was no malignancy, no intraepithelial lesion. And we did endometrial biopsy to be on safer side, which was also normal. So my next question is, what is the diagnosis and how will you go ahead?
I think pelvic inflammatory disease again.
No. As the patient is menopausal, we should think of malignancy first. And again, family history is very important in this case. Then clinical examination and investigations. Investigations, we can go ahead to CT or MRI to we have to see the extent and characterization of the mass, and keeping malignancy in mind, we should do the further workup, and definitely surgery is required.
Yes, so this is very important what he rightly told, as she is a menopausal lady, symptomatic with adnexal mass. Though uterus is normal, though ovaries are normal, but there is something in the fallopian tube. So I did this case in some small town called Gondavle. In Satara district, you must be knowing there is a Sansthan, Gondavlekar Maharaj Sansthan. So I go for service, means seva, since last 16-17 years for the operative cases of poor people free of cost. So I did this case because they have done this basic investigation. And when I took this patient, because they told me that the antibiotic course is already given to this patient, but still she is having a symptom and she is coming again and again. So we posted her for surgery, and let us have a look what happened in this case. Now here you can see the uterus is normal. Can you see, all of you? Yes. And the another tube and the ovary was normal. The right tube and ovary was normal. The uterus was absolutely normal, but the left fallopian tube was replaced by such a 10 by 10 centimeter mass with variable consistency, cystic somewhere solid like that, and rest of the other abdomen was normal. We thought that it could be a hydrosalpinx which is secondarily infected, that could be the thing, but to be on safer side we sent her for the histopathology, and unfortunately our report comes as a papillary adenocarcinoma of a left fallopian tube. Cervicitis is there, proliferative endometrium, all that is normal. Myometrium is also normal, left ovary is normal, but papillary adenocarcinoma of a left fallopian tube. So this is very, very important in many of the in postmenopausal lady. We know that fallopian tube carcinoma is a very rare condition. It is very rare. It is just 0.3% or 3 to 4% of all gynec cancers. It doesn't strike to your mind when you see the patient. So postmenopausal lady, the mainly age group is 50 to 60 years of manifestations with blood stain discharge per vaginal. So this patient is to be taken means with caution. We should not miss this patient just to give an antibiotic and suspecting that this could be a PID. Okay, because if she has a PID case, it would have recurred many times before. Okay, so the complete history and evaluation is also important.
And the type of surgery should be TH with BSO.
BSO. So yes. So in this case, we have done a TH with BSO.
With surgical staging also.
Staging laparotomy.
Yes. But here we did not know the diagnosis, but still we inspected all the abdomen, everything was fine, there was no ascites. But if you know beforehand that this is a fallopian tube carcinoma, your main management will be exploratory laparotomy, just like the CA ovary. Do a staging laparotomy, removal of complete tumor, TAH with BSO, taking the fluid for peritoneal washings for cytological examination if she doesn't have ascites. If she have ascites, you can take the ascitic fluid. Then another thing, palpation of the undersurface of diaphragm, liver, then para-aortic nodes, all these things. You also will remove the pelvic lymph nodes, then omentectomy. All this what we do in a ovarian tumor case will do in this case if you know it in beforehand. Okay, so this is very important. And what are the tumor markers of the fallopian tube carcinoma? These are mainly the CA125-1 and second is CEA and third is inhibin. Okay, so the one of the marker will be normal, another may be increased, we don't know. Therefore, it is a very confusing state. So, the clinical evaluation of such case is very important. Why I included this case? Because it's very interesting. So, I tried to include this type of the cases that which are very tricky and difficult for diagnosis and the management. This case I operated last year and now we have given her a post of chemotherapy, just like a CA ovary we treat the patient, and now she is up till now she is fine. Okay, so please remember that though fallopian tube carcinoma is rare, the main clinical trial of a fallopian tube carcinoma is a blood stain discharge PV, age 50 to 60, lower abdominal pain and the mass, tubal mass. Okay, so it is very important that you should keep this diagnosis in mind and just don't leave it as a pyosulfings or a hydrosulfings case.
And in every adnexal mass, we go on doing CA125, and it is increased only in only in epithelial carcinomas, not in other ovarian cancers and other malignancies.
Yes, that is also very important input, because CA125 is a tumor marker for mainly the epithelial cell tumor. Okay, so some or the other tumors you may miss it. One more thing, if we have a facility, means we must do, everybody is having this facility nowadays, that's the MRI. Okay, that you can go for the MRI. Now the next case is a young girl, 16 years. Her menstrual cycle is regular. Per abdomen examination, there is, I am just putting the positive points because short of time. Per abdomen, there is a huge mass occupying whole of abdomen, which is smooth, mobile, cystic in consistency. As she is an unmarried young girl, we didn't do her PSPV, we did a PR examination. We could feel the lower margin of mass and the rectal mucous membrane was free. CA125 is 19.1. Here I am sorry that it's CA15 I have written, but CA by mistake. CA125 is 19.1. We did other tumor markers also, because we thought as she is a young girl with such a huge mass, we did a AFP, we did a beta SCG, we did a CA, and all these are normal. We posted a first CT abdomen, and it was indicative of a left ovarian cystic mass, which was benign in appearance. So my question is, what is your diagnosis?
What is USG finding?
Ultrasonography findings are the same, what we see on the CT abdomen, which I have not written here.
Picture mostly goes in favor of germ cell tumor.
Germ cell tumor, okay, but it could be benign also, because CT is indicative of, and all the tumor markers are normal. We have done a alpha fetoprotein also, beta C, all these are normal, and the appearance clinical and all this is a cystic.
Cystic in consistency, that means simple cyst.
Yes.
That may be.
So it could be a
Mature teratoma.
So basically the diagnosis is a benign ovarian cystic mass. Okay. So how will you manage?
As the cyst is bigger, we should post this patient for laparotomy. Some people are doing it laparoscopically also. Yeah, they are just aspirating the cyst fluid and then
We
removing
can do simple
the cyst.
cystectomy also. Simple cystectomy,
Simple
laparoscopic
cystectomy.
cystectomy.
Yes. So what we'll do a ovarian cystectomy here. Okay. If you are well versed with laparoscopic skills for such a huge ovarian cyst, you may go for laparoscopic evaluation. If you are not, very well, you can do a exploratory laparotomy, remove the ovarian cyst, send for histopathology. She is a young girl, will not do anything else more than that, just the inspection of the abdomen and all that.
If we find some solid component, we should go for frozen section on
Frozen
table,
section.
because there are high chances of malignancy in such a huge.
Yes. So if you have a facility of a frozen section, we'll send it for the frozen section biopsy. But the appearance of the clinical appearance, the imaging studies and the tumor markers all indicative of benign. On laparotomy also is indicative of benign, so we'll just remove the ovarian cyst. But please remember that sometimes whole of the ovarian tissue is replaced by the cyst. It is very difficult to remove the cyst wall. We don't see a normal ovarian tissue also. In such cases, sometimes you may have to sacrifice that ovary. Okay, so it's very, very important. Laparoscopically, what she told, that it is possible nowadays they aspirate the fluid, then take out the cystic wall, but all this require a patience. But along whether you go by laparoscopy, whether you go by laparotomy, the complete and thorough inspection of our abdomen is very important, and to have a follow for the histopathology. So my next question is, what is the Roma risk?
It is a risk of ovarian malignancy algorithm. It is to be done in when we suspect like malignancy. We have to follow up, we have to estimate the risk so that we can differentiate between benign and malignant. In this algorithm, we use ultrasonography plus tumor markers to differentiate between CA125, HE4, and ultrasonographic findings.
And the most important is the
Menopausal, yes. Three are used.
Okay.
So in this case, this Roma algorithm will not be used because the patient is 16 years old. And Roma is for age more than 18 years.
Okay. See, she has rightly told that Roma algorithm is what? It is a risk of malignancy algorithm. And this is mainly used for those adnexal masses where the pre-surgical evaluation is inconclusive. Means you are not confirmed that it could be benign, it could be malignant, inconclusive. So this algorithm helps us to detect whether it's a benign or a malignancy, means suspicion, helps to assess. And what are the factors mainly? One is the menopausal state, second important is CA125, and third is human epididymis protein, that is HE4. The other things which you take into consideration or factors are the
Ultrasonography,
family history, transvaginal sonography, and clinical examination. That is also very important. But main three factors are menopausal state, CA125, and HE4. All these factors, there are certain scores are given, and this numerical score indicate a low risk of malignancy or the high risk of malignancy, which is this classification was given by the ACOG meeting which was held in 2015, and this indicate the evidence-based. This is a evidence-based classifications. Therefore, nowadays we are using it to assess the malignancy suspicion.
This is basically used like to define when to refer the patient to a oncologist.
Yes. So what is the clinical utility? This question is left and the answer is already given by our panelist. That what is the clinical utility?
This is to determine the likelihood of malignancy at the time of the surgery.
Yes. One is likelihood of malignancy at the time of surgery, and second important thing is beforehand we have to decide whether to operate in my hospital or whether I should refer it to a higher center, to a gynae onco. Okay, suppose you are practicing in Amravati, you are having your own nursing home, so you have to decide whether should I operate as a benign ovarian cyst in my hospital, or should I call beforehand some gynae oncologist with me, or it is not possible to tackle this case at my place, should I refer it to the tertiary center or the institute where all facilities are available. So this classification is very, very important, and why I included this question, though it is not relevant to this case because she is a 16 years, this classification is significant where the girl is more than 18 years. But it is very important from practical point of view. Of course, one point I missed, that premenopausal, the score less than 1.14 is a low risk, and postmenopausal less than 2.99 is a low risk. Please remember that any adnexal mass postmenopausal state we have to take with a caution and don't neglect it. Is time is permitting? Otherwise, I'll curtail one or more cases.
Last one minute left.
Last. Okay. Now I'll just keep one case, and now I would come to the very important discussion, that is ovarian cancer prevention. We talk a lot about a cervical cancer prevention. We do a pap smear, we do a visual screening, we do a HPV testing, we do a colposcopy, take a biopsy, treat a precancerous lesion, halt the progression of disease, prevent the malignancy. Okay, this is all now universal in the practice. But what about ovarian cancer? What is the opinion regarding ovarian cancer screening? The first question is it really needed?
Yes.
Yes. Definitely it is needed because the ovarian cancer incidence is increasing. And in the, you know that Western countries, it is the third most common cause of the death. And also in our scenario, most of the ovarian cancer cases are diagnosed in advanced stage, leading to an increased mortality and morbidity. So ovarian cancer is a major cause of contributing factor for a female morbidity and mortality. So ovarian cancer screening or prevention is must. That is, we are quite clear that it's very important. So next question is, can it be implemented effectively?
It cannot be implemented effectively because no clear-cut, any method is superior to one.
Yes.
And the cancer doesn't have any precancerous condition.
Yes,
that is
very important point. Cervical cancer is preceded by precancerous lesion. Ovarian cancers, we don't have such a long pre-invasive phase where we can detect. Another thing, the origin may be different. Third important thing, ovary is not accessible for examination easily. Cervix is accessible to the visual examination. This is not possible because they are high up in the ovarian fossa. So the ovary is inaccessible easily for examination and screening. We don't have effective method of screening because there is no long pre-invasive phase as in case of a cervix. So implementation of a routine screening is not there. This is one study I would like to quote by US and UK study which was conducted from 2001 to 2005. Yeah, just 2 minutes, and which is very important, so I am discussing that there is no reduction in mortality in the screened population and it is not cost effective. So the routine screening is not advocated. So when we'll do a screening? High risk group. In high risk group means those who are having a family history of ovarian cancer, breast cancer, endometrial cancer. Screening should be done in only high risk group. Routine screening, big
and
no.
even colorectal cancers.
Colorectal cancer, and it is done by CA125, TVS means transvaginal sonography, and the clinical examination every yearly. Now one very important question nowadays we all do, what is the role of bilateral salpingectomy in prevention?
Recently it is seen that the ovarian cancer origin may be from fallopian tubes itself, which was not known previously. So, yes, in serous type of carcinomas, which are the most common carcinomas. So nowadays prophylactic salpingectomy is offered to the high risk group, and we can do only the salpingectomy, and oophorectomy can be done later on.
So she has rightly told that many of the ovarian cancer like serous and endometrioid cancers, they originate in the tube instead of the ovary. And this is the invention of the last decade, and so what we are following today, that it could prevent, salpingectomy can prevent the cancer. Please remember that salpingectomy does not eliminate the ovarian cancer risk. I have done the salpingectomy, so I won't have the ovarian cancer in my future. That is not the case. It reduces the risk. Please remember, it does not eliminate the risk, but it reduces the risk of development of the future cancer. There are two types. What you do is one is prophylactic salpingectomy, and second is the opportunistic salpingectomy. Prophylactic salpingectomy, what she has told, that those who are having a high risk group, that is those who are positive for a BRCA1 and BRCA2, that is a pathogenic variants of a gene, or those who are having a family history, we can go for a prophylactic salpingectomy. Once she has finished childbearing, we'll just pull on till the age of 35 to 40 years, because if you do a oophorectomy at that time, what will happen? She will have so hormonal imbalance, so much, and all adverse effect. So to prevent that, we'll go for a prophylactic salpingectomy in women who are high risk and positive for the gene mutation.
Excuse me, ma'am, we need to stop.
Last. Second is we do a opportunistic salpingectomy. Opportunistic means what? When we do a hysterectomy for the benign surgery like fibroid, all that, in a peri and postmenopausal age group, we do a salpingectomy. So there is a 20 to 40% population risk reduction in CA ovary in coming 20 years when it is carried during hysterectomy and tubal ligation. So if she has finished her childbearing, wants the tubal ligation, you can go for salpingectomy. If you are doing a hysterectomy for a fibroid or something, you can preserve ovaries. Ovaries are normal, there is no ovarian pathology, but you can remove the tubes. So the opportunistic selfingectomy reduces. That is, I think, all regarding the adnexal masses in short. Thank you. Thank you very much for the
Thank you, ma'am.
panelists.